And welcome back, everyone, to our special edition of RFL. Now, let's be honest. There are many who think, hey, why bother with people who want to take their own lives? Sure, even if you save them from jumping off a bridge, you still can't save them from themselves. They'll just find some other way to take their own life. Well, the reality is the facts just don't back that up. Take a look at this. Each year, just in New York State, nearly 1,200 people commit suicide. The suicide rate almost 40% higher than the state's homicide rate. And according to a 2004 government report, New Yorkers commit suicide by jumping from heights at nearly 3 times the national average. The most of any state except for California, which is, as you know, home of the Golden Gate Bridge. And this may be the most telling stat of all. A 1978 study of more than 500 people who were prevented from jumping off the Golden Gate found that 94% of them had died from natural causes or were still alive 25 years later. The suggestion? If you can somehow stop someone from jumping off the bridge at that moment, with a little help, they may be able to live a full life. Now, it's those numbers that have driven us to push agency heads to put vital lifelines on our region's bridges. And joining that push were a couple of New York's leading mental health experts, Ellen Pendegar from the Ulster County Mental Health Association, and Gary Spielman, who is a suicide prevention consultant for the New York State Bridge Authority. You spent the better part of almost 5 years of your life not just trying to articulate the challenges of bridge suicide, but also that doesn't have to be an inevitability. And I would imagine part of this is trying to get people to rethink the situation, right?
That's correct. Yeah. Suicide seems to some people an act that cannot be prevented, but we know that it can be prevented in most cases because we know a lot of the risk factors and causes of it, and there are very effective treatments and measures that can be taken to prevent it.
There's also, in addition to the physical barriers, the human barriers.
Right.
And as one thing I get from this, the human barriers, not just as important, but arguably even more important. What is a human barrier?
The human barrier is essentially trying to put a human being in contact with a desperate person who may be suicidal. We have found that the human voice in the case of the call boxes, or the human presence in the case of a trained or aware employee or citizen or bystander or professional in the field of suicide prevention, their human contact will frequently spark a person to rethink their impulse to die by suicide and make a save.
Some of the thinking that, hey, if you talk about this, if you even address this subject, so suicide contagion, it's going to get much worse. You'll have people trying to do this everywhere. And it struck me, there really wasn't that much of a dialogue surrounding this. You tell me, I mean, should we be talking about this to the public?
Absolutely. I think the biggest problem dealing with this issue is stigma. And the whole issue about shame and the view of mental health versus physical health. Mental health needs to be talked about and practiced and serious dialogue about issues as much as any physical health condition.
Well, you've been a huge help throughout this project with us, and more than that, even though you've retired and you just can't get out of the rat race, you're still involved even pro bono. This is an issue that's very important to you, isn't it?
It is. It's. I lost a family member to suicide many years ago, and I know personally what people go through when they do lose a loved one to suicide, and it means it's been very gratifying work for me to be helping and contributing what little I can to save other people the pain of losing someone to suicide, particularly since we know there are effective treatments and resources out there to save lives.
Tell our audience what some of the biggest misconceptions are of the population that have sometimes tragically take their lives, because you know the general feeling out there is, hey, you know, it's a lost cause. In effect, they're going to do it. If not on a bridge, they'll find somewhere else to do it.
I think the greatest misconception is that it's rare and that it only happens to a certain type of people. Being suicidal is a human being condition. We're all human, and it can happen to any of us, and it depends on what's going on in our life. So any of us could get to a point in our lives where we might think of suicide.
one of the things that struck me about the report and some of the data is when there is a phone and when they pick up the phone, how many people don't follow through on, taking that fateful leap? People, it's a receptive audience, not always, but more often than I think the general population would imagine.
Well, when people listen to this report, I think there are a number of people that say, well, the person's thinking about dying, they start to think about a means, they get in their car, some of them get in their car, they drive to the bridge, they get out of the cars, they're thinking about jumping. Well, why do we need a phone? Okay, we need a phone because we believe even to that point, there's a part of them, there's a doubt, there's part of them that wants to live, okay? And we think that that is the part that is always there. Even in those moments when a person is convinced they want to die, there's a part of them that wants to live. And we want to give that part of the person the chance up to the very moment where they might act on their thoughts, an opportunity to be reached.
Finally, if there's one message that you want people at home, whether they're in a difficult spot or they're conflicted about the issue and whether it's worth from a public policy standpoint to invest resources in trying to talk people off the edge, what would that message be?
That suicide is everybody's business, that it can happen to any of us, and that we need to rely on each other to pull us out of those situations where we have thoughts of suicide, and that there's hope. And that I believe that most people, even at those moments when they're thinking about dying, have a part of them that wants to live. And that we want to connect with that part that lives and to give them hope that that part will come back into the forefront and things will get better in the future for them. So if they can't feel it at the moment, we can feel that for them and help them get to that point in the future.
Helen, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
It. And when we come back, we'll have some hopeful news. We're going to show you how all of our efforts have paid off as life-saving call boxes and fencing, they are installed on the Tappan Zee Bridge. Stay with us.